From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story on Saturday. I'm Manveen Rana.
"4 months after giving birth to my first child, I had discovered that I had a oversupply of milk.
It's 11 p.m, one night in the height of lockdown in 2021, and the journalist and author Alev Scott is sitting in her study, laptop open.
I didn't intend to sell my milk, but I wanted to know who was going to approach me, and I was expecting it to be perhaps other mothers with a low milk supply or adoptive parents, gay parents.
She's recently set up an account on onlythebreast.com, a site created for parents in need of breast milk for their babies.
But the vast majority of people who approached me within hours of setting up this account were men.
This was in no way what she'd been expecting.
Quite a few of them initially claimed that they needed breast milk for health reasons or because they were bodybuilders. A lot of bodybuilders are convinced that breast milk grows muscle more efficiently than anything else. However, some of the men who approached me didn't bother with any kind of medical reason, whether that was an excuse or not. They were just sexual requests. They wanted the milk itself, they wanted videos of me pumping my milk. And some of them requested wet nursing, adult wet nursing, so they wanted me to breastfeed them. This was an experiment I did to research the online commercial breast milk market. I did not expect it to go the way that it did. I just went deeper down the rabbit hole.
It was this experience that propelled Alev headlong into an investigation of this shady world of sexual kinks and an unregulated black market for breast milk, and from there to an undercover study of the murky industry that deals with every aspect of maternity, from egg freezing to surrogacy. Today, we talk to her about her devastating new book. The story this Sunday, Cash Cow, how the maternal body became a global commodity.
I'm Alev Scott. I'm a journalist and author. My latest book is called Cash Cow. It's about how the maternal body is commodified. It's about the darker sides of the fertility industry.
Let's take a step back. How did you end up on these online forums, discovering this whole new world of people who were looking for breast milk?
I actually gave birth in Amsterdam. A Dutch friend of mine had the same thing. She'd had an oversupply of milk. She had more than her baby could consume, so she started pumping it and storing it, freezing it. And she donated to the hospital where her premature baby was being looked after in the NICU ward. So I knew it existed.
This is like just based at hospitals, you can donate your milk.
Yeah, so I ended up donating my milk to the Southmead Hospital in Bristol, which actually supplies the entire southwest of the country. And I went and visited the milk bank later when I was writing the book. And it was extraordinary. It was so impressive. It was very NHS in the sense that it kind of looked like a small school kitchen. And yeah, they were doing this incredibly ambitious operation of pasteurising milk for premature babies all across the southwest of the country. What I had set out to do was to donate my milk, my excess milk, to a hospital milk bank, which I ended up doing. But because I had discovered the existence of this online market, I really wanted to find out more about who was buying, who was selling, and why.
Tell us a bit about this world that you stumbled upon, because you went into it thinking you were going to help people who maybe couldn't produce breast milk or it would help babies, and you find this whole world that you're not expecting.
So there's a kind of market value for online commercial milk. as in, informally traded, which is not a huge amount. In this country, it's around £1.50, around $2 roughly in the US, but it varies quite a lot depending on what the mother is advertising about herself, whether she has a gluten-free diet or an organic diet or whatever. Like it's quite
oh God, it's a bit like grass-fed.
Yeah, it is a bit. It is a bit.
Yeah. Wow.
And so certain types of supplier can demand a higher price, and fresh usually fetches a bit more than frozen. There are all these sort of market insights I picked up.
This is wild. It's a world I didn't know about.
Yeah, neither did I. And what was really interesting is when I actually met one of the guys who contacted me, a man in his 60s. I discovered he was quite lonely. He had a medical reason that he claimed meant that he needed it. He had IBS, and he was prepared to drive long distances. He was actually a truck driver.
And he thought breast milk would help with IBS.
That's what he said.
Irritable bowel syndrome. He thought it made it better.
That's what he thought. I was really interested in him. He seemed to want to talk, like no one had asked him about this before. And so he was all too eager to kind of talk to me. And he was an extraordinary person because he was so passionate and he spoke like a connoisseur. He claimed that he could tell what different women had had for breakfast, pretty much, like, whether they ate nuts or not, or he could tell the difference between breast milk that had been refrigerated before being frozen, for example, versus straight to the freezer. Like he knew the quality of the cream that kind of settles on the top of the milk bottle, and like the colour and whether it was pumped in the morning or the evening. He was like so passionate about this.
How long had he been drinking it?
A long time. So pre-pandemic, which was quite interesting because he was complaining that during the pandemic there was less milk to be had, I guess because people were, avoiding contact in general. But I suppose as a consumer, you would be a bit hesitant about drinking someone's random milk. So he was a very interesting person to talk to, and he gradually admitted to me that he'd paid for wet nursing. He'd paid for adult wet nursing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he described that.
Did you know that was a thing when he said he'd experienced
Yes, I did know it was a thing because I'd already been asked by several men online for that particular service. But I didn't. I wanted to be very open-minded. So when he told me it was for his IBS, initially I kind of took that at face value.
And you actually met?
We met.
How did that come about? Where do you meet a man who wants your breast milk?
I met him not at my address. I didn't give him my address. I gave him a meeting point kind of down the road. And my husband followed like a sort of Inspector Clouseau in the bushes, sort of just to keep an eye on things. I wanted to meet him in person. I thought journalistically that was quite important because I'd interviewed so many people remotely and had these kind of anonymous conversations, and actually I wanted to meet a real consumer of milk. I think I'm quite good at compartmentalising. So I was a mother, breastfeeding my second child at that point, but I really had the bit between my teeth. I really wanted to get to the bottom of this. I thought it was such an interesting kind of little pocket of research. So I basically promised him some of my milk in exchange for an interview. I felt very strongly I didn't want to sell my milk. I considered selling it and giving the money to the milk bank, but that felt a bit strange too, and they don't really take kind of financial donations. So I thought, you know what, it's a very small amount. The milk bank isn't interested anyway because it's too old. And it was just like lying around in my freezer. Now when I look back, I'm like, how could I have done? I mean, that's just such a weird thing to do. I was so deep in the rabbit hole at that point. And at the time, I was just thinking, this is my way to get the story. I need to get the story. And it was just a very surreal experience. I mentioned he's a truck driver, and he had parked his enormous lorry by the side of the road, and he was just waiting there for me in his high-vis jacket. We chatted. I mean, it was so weird. I had this like little frozen sachet of milk to give him, like sort of like, it was almost like a drug deal actually. And I felt a bit sick. It was not a comfortable experience at all.
And what did he tell you in person that you were?
He told me about the wet nursing, and
God, how did that make you feel when you've got somebody in front of you saying
Yeah. It was strange. He was so eager to talk about it because I don't think he talked about it with many people, if any. So it was almost like being a therapist. The way he described it was not as a sexual experience, which was interesting. He described it like a kind of just an intimacy thing. He said there was no sex involved. It was just a lovely kind of cuddling session with low lighting and nice music. And it really made me think of the cuddle cafes in Japan, you know, where you can pay to go and kind of just cuddle with a stranger. And it's just a service for lonely people, basically. So I don't know if he was entirely truthful about the fact there was no sexual element for him. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But clearly he got a lot of emotional nourishment out of this encounter with some woman off the internet. It was one of the weirdest bits of my research, definitely.
You said you actually spoke to a kink expert
Mm-hmm.
to try and understand what that's about. What did you learn?
I learned that, as I had discovered with Steve, the truck driver, it's not actually as sexual as you might think. There is some kind of... It's not quite a kink. I don't know if you've heard of the term adult babies, and this, in some cases, they are sexualized communities where men get pleasure out of dressing as a baby, basically, like having their nappies changed and stuff like that. Yeah. I was looking into infiltrating one of those clubs, but it's quite difficult as a woman. I would love to infiltrate an adult baby club. I think it would be absolutely fascinating.
Well, if anyone's listening.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got an in. And of course, for some people, there is a sexual element, but some people, this kink expert was explaining to me, just want to be a baby again. It's more of an emotional thing. It's not really a sexual thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, it feels very Freudian.
Yeah, very, very Freudian. I was really
Mother fixation almost.
Yeah, I was trying to suspend my judgment because, yes, I'm a mother, and when I was breastfeeding, I felt an extremely strong bond with my baby. But do I believe that there's some sort of holy bond, some sacrosanct connection that can never be broken or never be sort of sullied? I don't know. I'm not a woman who's ever needed the money, enough to have to advertise my milk online. I don't think I can judge women who have been in that situation. So that's what I try to do throughout the book, is suspend my judgment as much as possible to try and get to the real story of what was happening and why people do these things. What are the motivations? What are the financial motivations in particular, and how the market works?
Just give us a sense of the scale of this world and this market and the online forums. I mean, how common is this?
The online market itself, the informal, there's stuff on Facebook Marketplace. The website I was using is called Only the Breast. It's much bigger in the US than it is here in the UK. But actually, for all the sort of squeamishness that I felt when I was being approached by men for my breast milk, I did not feel as morally conflicted about that trade as I did about the big American pharmaceutical companies that make huge profits on milk donations.
Tell us about the farmer aspect.
So the farmer aspect kind of presents itself in an altruistic way, right? So often the ads that they have on their websites, the invitations to lactating women to donate their milk, make it sound like it's a charitable endeavour in many cases. Donors are compensated a certain amount, roughly what they might get online, but a little less perhaps than what they might get online in a kind of private marketplace. But what they then do to that milk is they process it and turn it into a product, often a freeze-dried kind of powder called fortifier, that they then sell to hospital chains to give to very premature babies in NICU wards there. And it's a profit-making enterprise. And so I felt that was a very, in some ways, troubling model, because I was thinking, okay, yes, they're turning it into a product that saves babies' lives, and that's great, and that's kind of their model that they're touting, but also, are they leeching non-profit donations? So only parents of children who are in these hospital wards with the right insurance to cover the costs of that fortifier, for example, that very expensive product, only they are benefiting from those donations, whereas donations to a non-profit milk bank, of which there are quite a few in the US, like not as many per capita as lots of countries in the EU and in UK, but I thought that's a problem for me. Like this idea that a company can make money from women's milk under the guise of it being turned into a sort of life-saving product. Yes, it is, but so are normal donations, that everyone should be able to access. Maybe that's just me having been, brought up in a country with the NHS and this idea of like healthcare for all. It's not an American way of doing things, but that model troubled me so much more than some random men online wanting some milk. I mean, I see that as interesting in a different way, but not as troubling.
What are the prices attached to the pharma version of this?
The end products are quite expensive. It's about $189 per litre.
Oh my God. That's more expensive than champagne.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So there's that price, and then there's a sort of $50 to $60 per litre that you would get on an online marketplace for your milk.
So you can understand why people end up on these online marketplaces, because the pharma version, as you say, raises all sorts of ethical questions, but it's also extraordinarily expensive.
Yes. And really, those products are reserved. I doubt there are many people buying those for sexual reasons.
Yeah.
I think that those are very medicalised in a hospital setting. They're being given to very premature babies. So it's a completely different market, but the underlying questions are the same. Should we and how do we judge the sale of breast milk as a commodity on the open market? Should it be treated as a commodity in that way?
Coming up, having gone down a rabbit hole and discovered the unlicensed world of human breast milk, Alev kept digging. This time into another aspect of maternity that has created a market worth billions.
It's been estimated that a human egg is extracted every 15 seconds somewhere. It's a very difficult market to track because a lot of it is not really above board, but it's a huge market with varying degrees of opaqueness, legality across the world.
We'll have more on that in just a moment. Alev, you've been telling us about this whole world you found, a market in breast milk. It led you to investigate other parts of the maternal experience and how that was being monetized and commodified. Tell us a bit about where you began looking at the market for eggs.
So I began in London. Many of my friends in their 30s have been freezing their eggs. And I was interested in kind of looking at how that worked, the extent to which clinics are policed in how they market their services. There's a lot of kind of big promises made by IVF clinics about kind of putting your fertility on hold, banking your eggs for the future. And I was trying to find out to what extent that is always done with the care that I think it should be. So with an American surrogacy lawyer, I got into a big philosophical debate about whether clinics that kind of basically prey on women who are very worried about their future fertility, whether that is exploitative or just being part of the market, taking advantage of the market. So the lawyer was very much of the opinion that, look, there's always going to be a market for these things. Women, couples in general, but particularly women when it comes to egg freezing, are worried about their future fertility. Why not market themselves to these women? And I was saying, okay, but isn't there a sort of extra vulnerability to this particular patient demographic, patient/client demographic, that makes it more exploitative? And he was adamant that wasn't the case. But I just instinctively felt there is a difference. It's an elective thing to do, to freeze your eggs, for most people. Some people do it because they get cancer and they're about to have chemotherapy or whatever. There's a medical reason. But for most women who do freeze their eggs, it is just sort of speculative. to answer your question, that is where my research started, kind of going to London clinics. I found out that some have a good rep, some have a bad rep within the industry, professionals who work in fertility. Essentially, it was above board. And actually, our regulator here in the UK is one of the strongest. I also wanted to look at the really unregulated markets, the cheaper markets elsewhere, and looked at how they do things. And so I went to Northern Cyprus, which happens to be where my mother is from. I know it quite well. I went a lot as a child. So I had some insight already into kind of the country itself. But it is just, in its own right, a very big fertility hotspot with so many IVF clinics. It's part of its tourism industry. So
wow.
People go...
How has that happened? Why has Cyprus become such a hub?
It's very competitively priced. It's between about a third and a quarter of the cost of treatments in, I'd say, London, certainly the US. It's got a good word-of-mouth reputation. Most of its clinics are quite highly regarded, but crucially, it's very unregulated, and they offer things that are illegal in most countries outside the US. So one particular thing being gender selection of embryos. I discovered from industry professionals, a lot of British couples go there specifically for that, for gender selection. It's quite popular with people from the Gulf, Europeans in general. It's quite a crowded market, like it's competitive among the clinics there. So I approached clinics and agencies, fertility agencies, as a potential customer, both of donated eggs and surrogates as well. I said I might need a surrogate because I was interested in how that process would go. When I was presenting myself as an egg donor, because I kind of wanted to find out what the experience would be like for a woman trying to
on
donate
both sides.
Eggs. Yeah, I had to pretend to be younger than I was, for one thing.
Oh, what's their ideal age?
I'm sure ideal would be somewhere in your mid-20s, but I mean, I couldn't get away with that, so I think I pretended to be 30.
I think you could.
Well, no, thank you. I pretended to be about 30, I think, or maybe 33 or something like that. The cut-off's 35. So most of the donors in Northern Cyprus are local students. There are a lot of universities there. I kind of approached a clinic and asked how much I would be paid per retrieval. And I was told, well, obviously it depends on how many eggs you produce, which I had not heard before. And I found out that if I only produced a few eggs, I would get very little money, 300-400 euros perhaps max. And, you know, women can produce anything from anywhere between 0 eggs and 50 eggs if they really respond to the hormonal stimulation. So I was kind of shocked by the fact that it would depend on my fertility, essentially. It felt very battery hen. Instinctively, I felt it was wrong. Like all these young women are going through the same levels of hormonal disruption. And I understood why it was a good business model for the clinic that didn't want to be shortchanged on what they'd spent on the procedure. But at the same time, it felt very wrong. And, you know, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, for example, explicitly says compensation should not differ depending on the egg production, basically.
Makes the processes equally uncomfortable.
Equally uncomfortable. And I don't know, there was something... I knew that these students were young, they were poor. It felt wrong, but then again, looking into the market in the way I did develop quite a sort of cynical, pragmatic attitude, and it was kind of a case of like, well, what does the market say? You know, in the US, if you're a particular ethnicity, if your eggs are in demand because of who you are, your achievements, your abilities, your phenotype, whatever, you just command a higher price. That's the way it is. Just in a way that a supermodel can earn more than someone with average looks in that respect. That was interesting to me. And then the extent to which some of the agency reps I spoke to when I was posing as a client who wanted to buy eggs, how open they were about the fact that blonde hair and blue eyes and certain kind of Eastern European phenotypes were more expensive than Asian or Turkish, for example.
When you say more expensive, I mean, what are the price tags?
I mean, again, it depends. It's not just on the it sounds so grim to even say it, like the quality of the donor, but the attributes of the donor herself. But it can be, for example, if you're paying for more contact. So an anonymous donor is less expensive than someone who would agree to maybe communicate with you or provide her contact details for any future children to contact her down the line. More information about her medical history, for example. I kept getting sent different Google Docs of different donors to look at, and there was one called VIP donors, and they came with like password protected videos, and you were going to pay more for more access to this person in whatever. Like the thing is, what again, I've said this before, I became very cynical about it all, and I was thinking, but how on earth are you going to check that you're being given the eggs of this particular woman? That's the woman you're being sold. Those are her eggs that you're being promised, but you're in no position to check whether that's actually the woman who's given you these eggs. It's just such an absurd leap of faith, an exercise in trust that I couldn't quite get my head around in some ways.
I can imagine. Do you have sort of like a ballpark figure in terms of how much some women are paying for eggs?
I mean, you can get donor eggs for as little as sort of €2,000, but depending on the market, I mean, in Northern Cyprus, you're probably not going to pay more than 10, 12,000 euros. And that's not just purely the price of the eggs themselves, it's sort of the costs built into that. So the travel and accommodation of the travelling donor, obviously the cost of the clinic and so on, but that's on top of it. I mean, I spoke to a rep from a New York agency that I met at a fertility kind of trade show. She worked at an IVF clinic in New York, and she said she'd just paid a donor $50,000, a Jewish donor.
Oh, wow.
And obviously that cost was going to be borne by the parents.
Yeah.
It wasn't, the clinic was just the sort of middleman in that situation. That's not unusual.
But extraordinary sums. You went from being interested in egg donation because, friends of yours were looking at freezing their eggs in London, and you end up in, again, this massive market. There are trade shows around fertility, which I had no idea about.
Yeah.
For you, having been to Cyprus, having seen both sides of that equation, what did you learn about that whole market? What was your big takeaway?
It made me very grateful that I didn't have to make these choices personally. On the one hand, I had my journalist hat on, and I was looking at the market and trying to be as cynical as possible, but I'm also a woman and a mother who has been extremely lucky in my path to motherhood. I've had a very heteronormative, normal journey where I haven't had to consider IVF. And it gave me an insight into what it must be like. Gave me a lot of sympathy for these couples and these women, but also there were points at which my ability to empathise was stronger than others. For example, when I went to a clinic in Northern Cyprus posing as a potential patient/client, I was asked to take an AMH test. And an AMH test is basically a test of your ovarian reserve, so how many eggs, broadly speaking, you have left. And it's really important for any gynecologist to know that before they start treating you. And it doesn't crucially tell you the quality of your eggs, but it tells you roughly how many you have left. And it's just a number. At that point, I kind of knew deep down that I wanted another child. And I just did not want to do that test, even though it would have given me a bit more insight. It was part of the research. It would have been easy to do. It's just a blood test. I didn't want to know because I was as afraid of what it would tell me. I was afraid the number would be low. And that, for me, was an example of a point of connection with the people I was researching. In some cases, extreme desperation, where they'll pay as much as they can possibly afford, sometimes more than that. They go into debt to kind of embark on these fertility journeys. And I thought, you know what, I can't even do that. I can't even do the first step. I don't have the moral courage or the normal courage, whatever, to find out something really basic about my own reproductive health. And these women go through so much more, rounds and rounds of egg freezing, IVF, miscarriages. And I just thought, wow, I'm writing about an experience that I'm so lucky not to have had myself.
You have looked into all of these subjects, from breast milk to eggs and surrogacy, with real sort of journalistic skill. What do you want people who are reading the book to take away from it?
I want to spark conversations. I want people to think about subjects that I think are often avoided because they're so laden with taboo. People do talk more about their fertility journeys than they used to. Definitely, surrogacy is a good example of that. We are talking about it more than we used to, but still there's taboo attached, there's stigma, there's shame. And I kind of think that there's enough of that now. We need to start having open conversations about how this market works. And the fact that regulation is so sparse in so many countries, and there's certainly no international framework of regulation, which ideally there should be, that has to change. So I'm not a policymaker, I'm not a professor of ethics, I don't have a background in fertility or medicine, but I'm just someone who wants to ask questions and provoke debate about something that I think is not discussed enough.
And for you, I should say, you're here, we're sat on opposite sides of the table. You are 9 months pregnant. Was it odd to, through looking at these different markets, to suddenly understand how some of the world views the maternal experience?
Being a mother, having given birth, having carried my own children, interviewing some surrogates who were so kind of blasé about having, carrying children for others, did kind of blow my mind. It was one instance where I could, my lived experience was sort of hindering my imagination in some ways. But because I feel so connected to my children and throughout pregnancy and now, and I know that bond is going to continue for life, it was difficult for me to imagine what these surrogates were describing to me. But I forced myself to take them at their word, and obviously they did feel like that because, for example, I spoke to one surrogate who carried 12 surrogate children. Of course she didn't carry emotional attachments. She'd considered it a job, and she was very straightforward about that. She was very proud of what she'd done and her ability to earn money and support her family while helping other families. And I was like, okay, well, that's amazing. You're an amazing person. I couldn't do what you do. I'm not even someone who has particularly difficult pregnancies, but, here I am. I'm full term. I could go into labour any day.
Our producer is on hand and prepared.
Yes, which I'm very grateful for. And like I said, I haven't, touch wood, had a very difficult pregnancy, but I am in discomfort. I cannot imagine doing this for someone. You are putting your life on the line when you become a surrogate. So the generosity of doing that, risking a horrible labour experience or, complications from a C-section or whatever it is, hemorrhaging, like horror stories I heard, doing that for a stranger is something that made me question whether, how good I am as a person, because I just couldn't imagine doing that.
And I hope you don't mind my bringing this up, but while you were doing these investigations, you actually experienced a miscarriage, which you write really movingly about in the book. How did that shape your conclusions and the way you viewed this marketplace for motherhood?
Well, again, it was one of those kind of flashpoints, I suppose, when my compartmentalization broke down a little bit. I had seen, looking at the market, how exploitative it can be and to what extent clinics can take advantage of women's desperation. But I hadn't really felt the emotions around that properly, I think, until I had my miscarriage. Because my miscarriage was medically managed. I didn't actually end up... My baby was dead, but I didn't miscarry, so I had to go into hospital and have surgery. And that experience and the thought that women can go through that again and again potentially because a clinic is prepared to put them through multiple rounds of IVF that perhaps are not going to work, and the clinic has a good idea that that's not going to work, and they're just sort of sold this little slice of hope I'm not saying that all women who undergo fertility treatment are treated badly. I'm definitely not saying that. And I'm not saying that all clinics are exploitative, but there is an element of exploitation in this industry. And there's a lot of money to be made. And so when I found myself in a situation where I could actually really imagine the experience of a woman who'd been treated badly within the industry, it made me so much more angry than I had been before, like very viscerally angry.
That was Alev Scott. Her book, Cash Cow, How the Maternal Body Became a Global Commodity and the Hidden Costs for Women, is out this week. You can also find an extract in The Times magazine and online at thetimes.com. To order a copy of her book, go to thetimesbookshop.co.uk. The producer and sound designer today was Dave Creasy. The executive producer was Kate Ford. And we'll be back, as usual, tomorrow.